Hi there, this is another lecture which is part of the, I would call, experimental electronic course on ethnicity, an introduction to ethnicity, ethnic studies, and we have a particular interest in looking at ethnicity in Thailand. And you will remember that we established that Thailand is an ethnically diverse part of mainland Southeast Asia, which morphs into island Southeast Asia. And so part of this course is going to be interacting with inter-ethnic dynamics, and for want of a better word, looking at the issue of ethnic conflict. You will realise later on that I have a preference for talking about ethno-linguistic conflicts, ethno-religious conflicts. I like talking about double-barreled ethnic issues for a number of reasons, but the most important is this, that primarily ethnicity has a lot to do with politics. The way in which I refer to myself and others, the way that I allow others to refer to me, the way that I seek to protect my own ethno-linguistic or ethno-religious community are primarily political issues. Political issues that anthropologists and sociologists can contribute a lot to understanding. But despite the need to know about these cultural dynamics and the dynamics of class and society, which are concepts that sociologists use, conflict is primarily a political issue. Let's not forget that. Okay, so this is a summary of the forms of ethnic interaction that we can come across. Half of these are positive, half are negative. We're going to look at the nature of the interactions and some examples in recent histories. You'll be directed to watch a bit of material, a bit of analysis on some of the dynamics in Myanmar, and we'll be looking at the case study of the Rohingya, and we'll be considering this as a case study of ethnogenesis, and so this table was put together before the Rakhine the problems in Rakhine State really took off. But this presentation is going to dovetail in with looking at particularly the work of Jacques Leyder, who is an historian who's worked in Rakhine State for a long time. And we've got some articles by him, and I've got some YouTube videos where he introduces his perspectives on Rohingya dynamics. Okay, so without further ado, let's just zip through this. So there are a range of positive, so let's go to full screen now. So there are a range of positive and negative interactions between ethnic groups. And a positive interaction is assimilation, where ethnic groups are absorbed within a dominant culture. Now, this is not to be confused. Assimilation comes in many shapes and forms, and an assimilation policy which is motivated to increase opportunities for education and to benefit from state apparatus. This is very different from an assimilation which primarily is concerned with erasing difference, the most important aspect of that being language. And so assimilation has been at work in many parts of the developed and developing world, and Brazil and the United States in the early 20th century are some important ones. And the introductory texts to issues of race and ethnicity present a number of case studies from North America, primarily because they were written by North American scholars, and this is their area of expertise. A second form of positive interaction is pluralism, is having a plural society, a society or region containing economically independent ethnic groups. So the emphasis is not on having ethnic groups being absorbed into a dominant culture, but there are some parts of the world where there is no dominant culture, and when that happens, not assimilation but pluralism becomes a major form of interaction between ethnic groups. There are examples of this. There are many examples of this, including parts of the Middle East and South Asia, particularly the SWAT. And you may or may not have, you were introduced to the work of Frederick Barth, who was a Norwegian anthropologist who made some very important contributions to thinking about ethnic interactions, and he was one of the scholars associated with the situationalist or circumstantialist school, which disagreed with primordialist perspectives on ethnic dynamics. Multiculturalism is similar to pluralism, where cultural diversity is valued and ethnic cultures coexist with the dominant culture. So those are the positive forms of interaction. There are also a range of negative interactions. Prejudice, where there is the devaluing of a group, primarily based on the assumed attributes of this group. And so I come from New Zealand, where there is long-standing and deep-seated prejudice against New Zealand's large indigenous population, the Māori. So I grew up in a ethnically diverse part of the world where racial and ethnic prejudice was widespread. Another form of negative interaction is discrimination. So this is another level from just prejudice, which is private, discrimination, where legal policies and practices actively harm specific ethnic groups. And an example of that is the Jim Crow era in the United States and South Africa during the apartheid era. There's another form of discrimination which is not legally sanctioned, but despite not being legally sanctioned, it is practiced. So although on the books everyone may have access to education and the legal system does not discriminate against ethnic minorities, actually in practice it does. Genocide is a lethal form of ethnic interaction, which is the deliberate elimination of groups through mass murder. And examples of this are many, sadly: Nazi Germany, Bosnia in the 1990s, Rwanda in the 1990s, Cambodia in the 1970s and 1980s, and in parts of Sudan, namely Darfur. Ethnocide refers to a practice of cultural practices actively attacked by the dominant culture or colonial power. And so people are not murdered, but cultural practices are actively, intentionally sought to be eliminated by the state or the dominant culture. So let's come out of full screen now. We can come out of full screen now. And as all of these sessions do, we're going to go to a small reminder about where this sits in with the course, about the issues that have been revisited. So there'll be links to other similar lectures in this series. Most importantly, you'll be directed to where to read. And I hope that you are enjoying jumping into the matrix and beginning to get your head, and I would also would like to hope your heart, around the important issue of interactions between ethnic groups, both positive and negative. So thanks very much for watching, and don't forget to continue to be reading. Thanks again. Bye-bye.